How did you know not to take the vaccine? All this pressure to take it, yet you stood strong and didn't take it. I give that as an example because one of the most important skills you must have in order to be successful in business and perhaps in life is the ability to critical think. You cannot trust that somebody says so just because they say so, right? The expert says, listen, in my legal business, I deal with tons of experts, and I know a lot of experts are full of shit. As a scientist myself, I'm a physician, and I've done plenty of experiments. You can shape or collect any type of, quote, data to get the end conclusion or the result you want. I'll tell you this, you have to be able to critically think in order to go against the grain, in order to be the standout amongst a sea of sheep. You cannot expand your thoughts and your mind and your ability and your evolution and your growth as a person or in business by running with the herd. Cannot. You have to stand out at some point. And the standing out to me is being able to critically think about things. Use your common sense. If it walks like a duck, smells like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a fucking duck, bro. Yo, what's up, everybody? This is the N2N podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. N2N, also known as the Ninja or Prolific Ninja by my family and friends. Because my fans are my friends, you can call me Ninja too. This is the N2N podcast, the Alpha to the Omega, the beginning, the end, talking about life, motivation, drive, success, self-improvement, and offering you morsels in this all-you-can-eat buffet called life. Back in the studio, it's been a wild summer. We missed a couple episodes. Hope you forgive us, but we've just been busy, traveling all over the place. Partly for fun, mostly for business, mostly for all the projects that we are launching into the second half of the year. And what are you doing to launch your career, your success into the second half of the year? We're going to talk about that today. But before we get into that, if you're new to the show or if you've been listening for a while, you know I'm a doctor, lawyer, business guy, have a law firm in Houston. We've been practicing now for almost a quarter century, helping thousands of clients recover millions of dollars. Also invested in several AI projects, consumer goods products, expanding statewide, expanding nationwide. And so I couldn't do all this without giving thanks to God and the universe. And so if you're new to the show, every day when I wake up, I always give thanks to God and the universe for an opportunity to hopefully live to my fullest controllable potential and inspire just one person that day to live to theirs. And hopefully that's you today. But with that, I want to thank everybody that supported the show over now 4.5 years almost. Supporting the show, sharing the show, liking, commenting, following. Thank you all. We could not grow to hundreds of thousands. I want to say close to 1 million followers and supporters that are active, not including those that just passively listen. We couldn't grow this without you all. So with that, I want to thank you all. And the only way we grow the show, because we have no ads, we have no sponsors. I do this with my own money, with the team, their time, getting this to you for free. And so we do that. We work together in a karmic exchange. I believe in karma, frequency, energy. And so I do not want your karmic debt. I give this to you free. If you gain inspiration, knowledge, any type of value out of this, that means you owe me something, and I don't want you to owe me anything. So to repay that karma, I ask that you do share the show. If you learned anything from this episode or any other episode or got any value, got a chuckle, got a laugh, got a giggle, whatever, if you got something positive out of the show, please do share. Please do share the show. And what we say here is if your knowledge swole, share the show. That's how we together grow. So straight into it, man. It wasn't covered in the news, if at all. But if you didn't know, Dr. Fauci, after giving a 10-year presidential pardon, testified in front of Congress this last week. And whether it made the news cycle, it's already out of the news cycle, and it didn't get on many people's radar. But the question comes to be, why did he have to go testify in front of Congress? Well, obviously, there are issues around what's called gain-of-function research, which is transforming viruses or bacteria, giving them additional genes or messing up their genetics to make them more virulent or more deadly. Or there was an issue over the vaccine, right? And I'm not going to rehash the whole vaccine debate and be controversial about it. The reason I bring it up is every question that was brought up, not every question, but most of the questions that were brought up, he pled the fifth. There's a constitutional right to not testify if it might criminally implicate you. So you have the Fifth Amendment right to not testify to protect any type of criminal accusation that from what you might say. So if you had a 10-year presidential pardon, why would you have to invoke the Fifth Amendment? right? You could just speak freely because there's nothing, there's no way to get you because you've got a pardon. So why should you not say something for the sake of self-incrimination? That's a legal question. To avoid being controversial, I will just say I did not get vaccinated with the COVID vaccine. In fact, my whole family did not. I encouraged them, my whole immediate family, me, my wife, son, daughter, and my parents. Other members of my family, they did what the hell they want. But for me, I encouraged all of them to not get vaccinated. And that's not a statement to say I was right, I was wrong. That's not a statement. That's just to give you a framework from where I'm coming with this particular podcast topic. And it has nothing to do with the vaccine. But the vaccine is an example. I know several friends that got the vaccine. I know several friends that are happy they got the vaccine. I have several friends that got the vaccine, talking about the COVID vaccine, and are regretful of it. I have several friends that have called me and asked me, hey, man, I was coerced. I had to get it for my job, for the military, whatever. What can I do now? Because I'm scared. I don't know what happened to my body. Whatever it is related to the vaccine. So it's all across the board. As long as you made the best decision for you, that's what it should be. I mean, I have nothing against people that took it, nothing against people that didn't take it. I didn't take it. But I bring this up because not to say I told you so, but ultimately how I came to the right decision for me. And I think the right decision overall. Because the vast majority of people that I know that took the COVID vaccine regret taking it. And so I get asked a lot, how did you know not to take the vaccine? How did you, because there was so much social pressure, political pressure, all this pressure to take it, yet you stood strong and didn't take it. How did that happen? And I bring that up, again, not to gloat, say I was right, say I was wrong, say whatever. Everybody made their own decision with the information they had at the time that they thought was best for themselves. Good for you all. I give that as an example because one of the most important skills you must have in order to be successful in business and perhaps in life is the ability to critical think. Okay? Critical thinking, I truly believe, is a long lost art. The ability to critically think allows you to stand strong for what you think is right against an immense amount of pressure, socially, politically, whatever, right? Trust the science. If you really look back, there was no science around the vaccine. It was people telling you to just take it for the public good. Okay? So had you had the skills to critically think, you would have been like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Where is the actual science? There's a ton of science behind herd immunity, but yet none of that was spoken about. In fact, that's how most children build their immune system, is by playing with other children and being exposed to other, types of bacteria so that they can build their own immunity. Tons of research about that, but none of that was being spoken about. So the idea here of this podcast episode is how do you critically think? Okay, what things should you be aware of and conscious of in order to develop your critical thinking skills? Well, the first one is you got to question everything. You have to question every single motive, not just about the vaccine, but in business. Why is somebody offering this proposal to me? What do they have to gain out of it? Same thing in this situation with the COVID vaccine. Why are they giving this vaccine? And what does whoever is promoting this, what do they get? What do they have to gain out of this? Well, obviously that was Pfizer and Moderna and all this money, right? Right? So critically think and understanding motivation is asking why something is being put in front of you and who stands to gain. Anytime in my business, if somebody comes with a business proposal, if a lawyer comes in with a settlement agreement, let's say we're in the middle of a case and all of a sudden I get an offer to settle a case. My question is why am I getting this offer now after we've been battling over this case over several months, maybe even years? what do they have to gain? They're either motivated by something, and so my job as a critical thinker is trying to understand what that something is and trying to get to the end in determining what that something is. Maybe they're feeling pressure to settle the case. Or maybe their case is not as strong as they think they are. Or maybe there's a fact that I haven't found, but they found that weakens their case. In any particular instance, I have to understand, why is somebody doing whatever they're doing when generally it's contrary to their own benefit. Okay? The second step in critical thinking is you always have to consider the source. You cannot trust that somebody says so just because they say so. Right? The expert says, listen, in my legal business, I deal with tons of experts, and I know a lot of experts are full of shit. An expert, quote, expert, there's two things about experts. One, actually there's three things. One is, as a scientist myself, I'm a physician, and I've done plenty of experiments. You can shape or modify the data, not modify, I shouldn't say that. You can shape or collect any type of, quote, data to get the end conclusion or the result you want. Most people think, well, the data says this. The way it actually works is, I want the data to say this, so let me work backwards to get the data that's going to support what I want to say. That's how it really works, people. Okay? That in itself is critical thinking. I know for a fact, for example, in case in point, in drug discovery, in true drug discovery, right? It takes 7 to 10 years to get a drug approved. Again, common sense. The vaccine was approved in like 10 months. Makes no sense. Makes no sense. That being specialized knowledge, yeah, I've been in the drug development industry. But if you just done your research, you would know that a typical drug takes 7 to 10 years. The vigor that drugs go through to make sure they're safe and efficacious, safe and effective, takes 7 to 10 years. So to believe something that got pushed through warp speed, whatever the fuck it was called, in 10 months to say it was safe and effective, the fact that people believe this just blew my mind. But going back, I know that, let's say, for example, I want a drug that cures high blood pressure. Like, there's drugs that address high blood pressure. Nothing cures it. But hypothetically, and I have to prove a certain level of statistical significance that my drug can cure high blood pressure. Well, I'm not going to enroll patients with diabetes in my study, right? Because that's not going to give me the right statistical significance of high blood pressure patients to prove that it works. So what I'm going to do is front load, right, my enrollment with patients with high blood pressure. But let's say my drug hits a specific target of like genes and high blood pressure, right? Theoretically. So out of that group of high blood pressure patients that I'm going to put into my clinical trial, I'm going to look for the ones that have that gene sequence. So I've narrowed the scope even more, but then when the result gets done, I can say, well, my drug affects 90% of the people with this gene sequence, even though there might be, 80% of the high blood pressure drug patients that the drug doesn't even work for. But then I get to prescribe it to high blood pressure patients, right? So you can front load data to get the result that you want. So it's trusting the source. The second thing is that experts typically will say who pays them what they want them to say. So again, when you go back to experts, you go back to the money. And whoever is sponsoring the expert, you got to look at what motivations the expert is talking about. Right? And then the third thing, again, I'm working with tons of experts across I've deposed them, I've put them on the stand, I've done a lot of things. And I will tell you this, experts generally are full of shit. Okay? So again, you must learn to, critical thinking requires being skeptical, asking the right questions, get to the source. The way to validate a source is somebody's going to make a statement. Okay? This drug will do that. Okay, show me the actual study. What did you use to get to that conclusion? And that's what we do in law. What is the basis or what is the data you relied on to make the conclusory statements you have? just because they're on CNN or Fox News or something on TV saying, this is what we have. There was no statistical data to show that 6 feet did anything to anybody. I mean, where was the data that said, hey, you can walk into a restaurant if you wear a mask, but when you sit down, you could take it off to eat? There's absolutely, number one, that just sounds ludicrous against common sense. But number two is there's absolutely no study that says, hey, the COVID virus only floats around at, between 6 feet high and 10 feet high, but below 6 feet, it's not around, so you can take your mask off to eat. There's none of that. Like, there was none of that. Right? You just had to look at people playing musical instruments with a mask, but there's a slit through the mask where they can blow into the saxophone or the clarinet. Like, how does that make sense? And again, where's the statistical study that shows that actually was effective? Yet people just went with it. Same with the vaccine, man. It was just, you just have to question the source, question the experts, question the source, think, ask the right questions, understand motivation. And lastly, there's this expression: if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it must be a fucking duck. It basically means trust your common sense, right? Trust your common sense. Trust what intuition is telling you, right? I go all of these things. If they have to coerce you to, in this instance, they'll remember who was it? The mayor of New York. Hey, if you get a vaccine, we're going to give you a cheeseburger and fries. I mean, Krispy Kreme, I think they're out of business now, but Krispy Kreme, they were offering free donuts to get vaccinated. If it was you just have to ask yourself, if it was good for you, why would they have to offer you a free donut to go get it? If it was really effective, why would they have to offer you all these coercive things to go get the vaccine? And then it goes back to, okay, if they have to coerce you to get it, who gets the gain out of this? Who is giving the mandate to coerce people, to get it? All these things you put together, you're just like, man, something smells wrong. Like, I'm not going to comply. Just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean you have to. You might be the only I'll tell you, in my family group, and there was a whole situation around vaccinated or unvaccinated. And again, there was a lot of pressure, and we said, nope, not going to do it, because my common sense said, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. Like, if COVID were that bad, you guys just ask yourself questions. Like, just think. The problem was people were too, plugged into their phone or TV or whatever the hell, to not just think. If it were that deadly, where are all the bodies of the homeless people that weren't masked, didn't get vaccinated? None of this. Right? In the middle, talking about in the thick of COVID between like March 2020 and like 2022. Where are all the piles of dead people in third world countries? Where was all that? Like, even fast forward to today. Like, if it was that bad, we'd all be dead. Right? So, and then the last step, like, God, this just gets me really so fired up, because it was just like, my God, can't y'all see this? The last step is you got to do your own research, right? You're going to ask the critical questions. You're going to go to the source, right? You're going to use your common sense, and then you got to actually go do work and research, right? Why do I think this is not true? And that was for me. All this pressure was like, do this, you got to comply. And I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Why? So for me, I started, in June. There's a video on my socials, The Prolific Ninja. I remember this vividly. June 2020, I posted a video about using the PCR, the polymerase chain reaction, as a diagnostic for the COVID test. And I said, it doesn't work. And I posted the video, and then the summation of the video is that the PCR takes a sample of DNA or RNA, the genetics of whatever, the virus or you, and it amplifies that. And based on that amplification, it runs, whatever is in that mix against a reference DNA. And if there's a reference that matches in the mix, it's a positive, right? The issue is that every cycle is an exponential replication of the DNA. So let's say you replicate it once, you get 2 copies. But if you replicate it again, you end up with like 10 copies. And you replicate it, so you've only gone through 3 cycles, but then you get like multiple copies, where a normal PCR test around 20 cycles is accurate, right? You get an amplification of the DNA just enough where there's no randomness injected into the equation, pun intended. The PCR tests were running at 40 to 50 cycles, which makes so much DNA in the solution that the result is entirely random. That there's so much DNA that inevitably you're going to get a positive result because there's so much RNA or DNA floating around in the solution, it's going to match the reference that you have to go against, right? And so in that context, I posted the video in June saying this is some bullshit. You don't know how many medical school doctor friends of mine were like, dude, I can't believe you posted that because that's going to fuck a lot of things up. I'm like, dude, it's real. The PCR tests, there were so many false positives that inevitably, remember the CNN tracker of how many positive tests and how many people died and classifications of dead. I mean, did you know that hospitals were getting up to, I want to say, $70,000 extra for a COVID death versus a regular death? If the autopsy or the death certificate said die from COVID, bump $70K. Again, going to your research, understanding motivations, asking the right questions. Of course, and what is incentivizing people? If I was a hospital administrator, I'm like, holy shit, the government's paying $70K for every COVID death. Everybody in my hospital that dies is going to die of COVID. I got shareholders to answer to. And maybe my bonus is tied to my stock performance. Hell yeah, I'm going to make every death a COVID death. See, that's the thing, man. Like critical thinking may ostracize you, but ultimately it gets you ahead. And you have to be able to critically think in order to be successful. Because if not, what happens? I'll tell you this. You have to be able to critically think in order to go against the grain, in order to be the standout amongst a sea of sheep, so to speak. And you cannot grow yourself. You cannot expand your thoughts and your mind and your ability and your evolution and your growth as a person or in business by running with the herd. Cannot. You have to stand out at some point. And the standing out to me is being able to critically think about things. Unfortunately, this was a matter of life and death and health, and my prayers go out to anybody affected by the vaccine. I know several people that, athletes died, people with heart issues, just people that seem healthy, but in the back of their mind, they're just worried some shit might go down at some point in time because it's only been 4 or 5 years, no long-term studies, right? What's going to happen in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years with this random gene, therapy in your body? Who knows? Who knows? But the ability to critically think is gives you the ability to go the opposite direction when everybody's running this way. And I will tell you that contrarians make a shitload of money and are very successful because they think unconventionally. And unconventional thinking requires critical thinking, right? So I apologize if this seemed to be a ramble because I'm just very passionate about it. It still makes me a little bit, it gets my blood pressure up, my temperature up, thinking about how many people were affected by wrong decisions by, quote, leaders around the COVID issue, right? If you did your research, actually, you would understand that COVID was just no more common than the flu. It's just really the flu. Like, why do you have millions of flu deaths, and during COVID, it dropped to almost 0? And then, now that COVID was no longer a thing, flu deaths are up again. I mean, it just didn't make sense, man. And so, I'm just really passionate about this only because I've seen so many people negatively affected by this, both in their health and economically, because people forget how much wealth was transferred. Trillions of dollars were transferred from us, the lower up to upper middle class, to the big corporations and the elite wealthies. Trillions of dollars. Like, why could you go shop at Target and Home Depot, but you couldn't go to your mom and pop hardware store? Why was that? Right? all the money was going there. Like how could you not go surfing by yourself without getting arrested? Like it just didn't make sense, bro. It just didn't make sense. But man, critical thinking is so important. So how do you critically think? I mean, there's 4 steps, 4 categories of ways to look at things. You got to ask the right questions, right? Consider the source. Don't just trust the experts, right? Consider the source. Get as much detailed information as you can. Use your common sense. If it walks like a duck, smells like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a fucking duck, bro. And then fourthly, you got to do your own research. It takes effort to critically think. Yeah, it takes a lot of energy. It's easy. And I think that's where a lot of people fell, I don't want to say victim. Well, actually, they were victims. Fell victim to the vaccine issue is that it was just easy to follow what everybody else was doing. It was a high-stress time, and during high-stress times, it was like, oh, they're doing it. I'm just going to do that. Because you don't have, it's overwhelming. A lot of anxiety, right? Right? Do it for the good. Do it for you take the moral high ground. Kill yourself, but you're morally right. That makes no sense to me, bro. It's like, no, self-preservation is the first thing, bro. Like, so, like literally it's critical thinking is that important if you really want to get ahead. And, if you want to be lazy about it and just do what everybody else is doing, that's great. But don't expect to be a standout. Don't expect to be, to be able to live that life you were destined to live to your fullest potential. To get to that potential, you must be able to critically think. And I will say along the way, there have been many people that have thanked me for convincing them not to get the vaccine. So it's kind of I don't know, may lose some viewers out of this. Who knows, whatever, I don't care. But as long as this message gets out there. And it's not, again, this episode was not about the vaccine. I'm using the vaccine as a discussion point on why you need to critically think, how you need to critically think. And if you still think the vaccine was the right thing to do, bless you, man. That's good for you. Good for you. But I know a lot of people that believe it wasn't the best thing for them. And unfortunately, whether they had to do it for the job or whether they had to do it for the education or military or whatever, I get a lot of those right now. They just ask me, man, what can I do about it? And, we have that conversation. But it's just so very passionate about me because I hate people getting taken advantage of, to be quite frank with you. I think that's where it really it just fires me up. That people got taken advantage of globally in a very, very negative way. So with that, man, wild podcast. I don't even know what to think about it. Maybe because my mind is back in deposition mode. But my point being is that you got to be able to critically think in order to get to your fullest controllable potential. So with that, if you're new to the show, I close my show as I close every day. When I put my head down on the pillow, before I close my eyes and drift off to la la land, I always thank God in the universe for another day to have been great. Hopefully live to my fullest controllable potential and hopefully inspired somebody else. And hopefully that's you today. Whether you took the vaccine or not, if you learn how important critical thinking is and certain steps you can take to learn how to critically think, then that's you. And so if you were inspired today, or if you learned something new, balance out that karma, share the show. If you're knowledgeable, share the show. That's how we grow. Or go visit my law firms, CureConnector.com, MyMedi.com, LegacyStoken.com, Naya.com. It's actually MyMedi.ai, MyMeddiai.ai. If you're in Monterey Car Week next week, there's going to be some exciting things going on. So I might be there. I may not be there. We'll see. You have to show up. But in any case, be great today, but be even more grateful. I'm looking forward to bringing you another episode very, very soon.